The scissors gleamed under the harsh cabin lights as flight attendant Rebecca Morrison's hand trembled with rage, the severed locks of black hair falling like accusations onto the pristine first-class carpet. "You people need to learn some respect," she hissed, her face flushed crimson, completely unaware that the calm, composed woman watching from 3 rows back wasn't just another passenger. She was Elizabeth Chen-Williams, CEO of Skyward Airline's largest competitor, and those children were hers. But let's rewind. Let's start from the beginning because this story, this absolute clusterfuck of entitlement, prejudice, and corporate reckoning, began 6 hours earlier in the humid chaos of Miami International Airport. Maya and Marcus Williams were 14-year-old twins, and if you'd seen them that morning, you'd have noticed them immediately. Not because they were loud or disruptive, quite the opposite. They moved through the airport with the quiet confidence of kids who'd been traveling since they could walk. Maya wore her hair in thick, beautiful dreadlocks that fell past her shoulders, each one carefully maintained, wrapped at the ends with small golden beads that caught the light. Marcus had the same. His locks pulled back into a neat ponytail, professional, clean, striking. They were dressed well. Too well maybe. Maya in a cream-colored blazer over a black turtleneck, designer sneakers that cost more than some people's rent. Marcus in dark jeans and a fitted button-down, a vintage watch on his wrist, a gift from his grandfather. They looked like money because they were money, but the thing about being young and black with dreadlocks is that people often see the hair before they see anything else. Their mother, Elizabeth, walked several paces behind them, deliberately. She was testing them, always testing them. At 42, Elizabeth Chen-Williams was a woman who'd built an empire from nothing. Her father was Chinese-American, her mother was black, and she'd grown up understanding that the world would try to put her in a box. She'd spent her entire life breaking those boxes apart. She ran Quantum Airways, the second-largest airline in North America, and she was in Miami for exactly one reason: corporate espionage, though she'd never call it that. She called it competitive research. Skyward Airlines, her biggest competitor, had been stealing market share for 2 years, and Elizabeth wanted to see their operation firsthand. So she'd booked herself and her kids on a Skyward flight to New York, first class, under her married name, Williams. No one would recognize her. No one would know. The twins reached the gate first. Maya dropped into a seat, pulling out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Marcus stood, stretching, his dreadlocks swaying slightly as he rolled his shoulders. They'd been up since 4 a.m. "You think Mom's actually going to relax on this flight?" Maya muttered, not looking up. Marcus snorted. "Mom doesn't know how to relax. She's probably already counting how many times the gate agent smiles." 17, Elizabeth said, appearing behind them like a ghost, making both twins jump. "And it's fake every single time. Corporate smile. No eye contact. They're understaffed." Maya groaned. "Mom, can you not work for like 5 seconds? Elizabeth sat down, crossing her legs, and for a moment, just a moment, she let herself smile. Really smile. "Fine. No work talk. How's the college application coming?" "It's November, m. I have time," Maya said. "That's what you said in October." "Can we not do this here?" Marcus, the peacemaker, cut in. "I'm starving. Think they'll have actual food on this flight or more of that sad sandwich situation?" Elizabeth pulled out her phone, already checking Skyward's in-flight menu. Premium dining in first class, according to their website. Duck confit, apparently. We'll see if it lives up to the hype. What none of them noticed, what they couldn't have noticed, was Rebecca Morrison, standing near the boarding door, watching them. Rebecca was 36, blonde, angular, with the kind of sharp features that looked striking in photos but harsh in person. She'd been a flight attendant for 12 years, and she was bitter about every single one of them. She'd started this job dreaming of adventure, of exotic destinations and interesting people. What she'd gotten instead was back pain, passenger abuse, and a salary that barely covered her ex-husband's child support payments. She was tired, angry, and she'd developed a particular radar for people she deemed problems. The twins, with their expensive clothes and their dreadlocks and their easy confidence. Rebecca clocked them immediately as trouble. She didn't think of it as racism. She thought of it as pattern recognition. In her mind, passengers who looked like that were always demanding, always entitled, always making her job harder. She was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Boarding began, and the Williams family was in the first group. Elizabeth hung back again, letting the twins board first, watching how the crew treated them. It was a test she ran constantly, though she'd never told them. She wanted to know who her children would become when she wasn't standing right there to protect them. Maya handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a young guy with tired eyes who barely looked at it before scanning. Marcus followed. They walked down the jetway, backpacks slung over their shoulders, and stepped into the plane. Rebecca was there, positioned right at the entrance to first class, her smile plastic and tight. "Welcome aboard," she said automatically as the twins approached. Maya smiled back, genuine one. "Thanks." Rebecca's eyes dropped to the boarding passes in their hands, then to their seats, 3A and 3B. First class. Her expression flickered, just for a second, something cold passing behind her eyes. "Those are your seats?" Marcus, confused by the question, nodded. "Yeah. Is there a problem?" "Let me just verify that." Rebecca held out her hand, and Maya, uncomfortable now, handed over her phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. Rebecca studied it for way too long. Long enough that the passengers behind them started to bunch up in the aisle. Finally, she handed it back, her smile even tighter. "Everything appears to be in order." The words dripped with skepticism, and Maya felt something twist in her stomach. That feeling. The one she'd felt 100 times before in stores, in restaurants, in spaces where people looked at her and decided she didn't belong. Marcus touched her elbow gently, a silent, "Let it go," and they moved to their seats. Elizabeth boarded 30 seconds later, her trained eye catching the way Rebecca's posture had changed, the tension in her shoulders. She filed it away. The flight was scheduled for 2 hours and 40 minutes. It would become the longest 2 hours of Rebecca Morrison's career. For the first hour, everything was fine. The plane took off smoothly, the cabin leveled out, and the first-class service began. Maya had her headphones on, watching something on her iPad. Marcus was reading, his dreadlocks falling forward as he bent over his book. Elizabeth was in the row behind them, working on her laptop, occasionally glancing up to observe. Rebecca moved through the cabin with her service cart, her colleague James, a soft-spoken guy in his 50s who genuinely loved his job, working beside her. They reached the twins' row. "Can I get you anything to drink?" James asked Maya, his smile real, his eyes kind. Maya pulled off her headphones. Just water, please. With lemon if you have it." "Absolutely." James poured her water, added lemon, handed it over with a napkin. Marcus ordered a Coke, and James served him with the same warmth. Rebecca, watching this exchange, felt that familiar irritation rising. Why was James being so nice to them? They were kids. They probably didn't even pay for these seats. Probably some rewards points or an upgrade or something. They didn't deserve this treatment. When James moved to the next row, Rebecca lingered. "You two flying alone?" she asked, her tone just a shade too sharp. Maya looked up, uncertain. "Our mom's right there." She pointed back to Elizabeth. Rebecca glanced back, saw Elizabeth in her business casual, working intently. Didn't recognize her. Saw only another black woman, probably spending money she didn't have on a first-class seat to show off. "I see," Rebecca said, in a tone that made it clear she saw something very different from reality. "Well, make sure you keep your belongings stowed properly. This is first class. We have standards." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Our stuff is stowed. I'm just reminding you of the rules." "We know the rules," Maya said quietly, her hands balling into fists in her lap. Rebecca smiled, and it was the smile of someone who just won a small victory she thought she deserved. She moved on. Elizabeth, who'd been listening to every word through her earbuds, which weren't actually playing anything, made a note on her laptop. She was building a file. She didn't know yet what she'd do with it, but she was building it. The incident happened 90 minutes into the flight, right as the meal service was wrapping up. Maya had excused herself to use the bathroom, and when she returned, she found Rebecca standing in the aisle next to her seat, holding something in her hand. Maya's stomach dropped when she saw what it was, the small, zippered makeup bag she kept in her backpack, the one with her hair ties, her edge control, her hair oil. "Is this yours?" Rebecca asked, her voice loud enough that heads turned in the cabin. "Yes, that's mine. It was in my backpack." Maya's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. "It was on the floor, blocking the aisle. That's a safety hazard. I didn't leave it on the floor. It was in my bag under the seat." "Are you calling me a liar?" The cabin had gone quiet. Marcus stood up, defensive. "She's not calling you anything. She's just saying that's where she left it." Rebecca's face flushed red. "I need both of you to lower your voices. This is first class, and I will not tolerate disruptive behavior." "We're not being disruptive," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly. "You're literally holding my stuff, accusing me of—" "Sit down now." Elizabeth was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her professional calm fracturing, but before she could stand, James appeared, his expression concerned. "Rebecca, what's going on?" "These passengers are being disrespectful and disruptive. I'm handling it." James looked at the twins, two scared kids who clearly hadn't done anything wrong, and then at Rebecca, and understanding dawned in his eyes. He'd seen this before. He'd seen Rebecca profile passengers, seen her treat people differently based on. "Rebecca, let's talk in the galley," he said firmly. "I'm in the middle of addressing a situation." "Now, Rebecca." They moved to the galley, their voices low but intense. Elizabeth used the moment to lean forward, touching Maya's shoulder. "You okay, baby?" Maya's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Mom, I didn't do anything. I don't know why she—" I know you didn't." Marcus was shaking with anger. "This is bullshit. She's been watching us since we got on the plane like we're going to steal something." Elizabeth's expression was ice. "I want you both to stay calm. Can you do that for me?" They nodded, but the damage was done. The other first-class passengers were staring, some sympathetic, others annoyed at the disruption, and that feeling, that horrible, familiar feeling of being watched, judged, found guilty without trial, settled over the twins like a shroud. In the galley, James was speaking in a harsh whisper. "What the hell is wrong with you? They're kids. They haven't done anything. They're disrespectful. Did you hear how she talked to me? She defended herself because you're harassing her." "I am not." Rebecca's voice rose, then dropped. "I am doing my job. I am maintaining order in this cabin. You're profiling passengers and you know it." Rebecca's expression turned venomous. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare make this about race. This is about behavior. This is about standards. Those kids, with their hair, dressed like they're going to some rap concert, they don't belong here." James's face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Rebecca, did you actually just say that out loud?" And that's when Rebecca snapped. She'd been holding it together, barely, but something in James's expression, the judgment in his eyes, the way he was looking at her like she was the problem, like she was some kind of monster, it broke something inside her. She stormed back into the cabin, moving quickly toward the twin seats, and before anyone could react, before James could stop her, she was standing over Marcus, her face twisted with rage. "Your hair is a violation of our passenger conduct policy. It's unsanitary and inappropriate for this cabin." Marcus stared at her, disbelieving. "What the fuck are you talking about?" "Marcus," Elizabeth warned, standing now, her voice sharp. Rebecca pointed at his dreadlocks. This is the problem. This is what I'm talking about. You come onto this plane into first class, looking like what?" Marcus stood up, towering over her at 6 feet tall. "Say it. Like what?" And then Rebecca saw them. The scissors. The emergency medical scissors in the seat back pocket right next to Maya's seat, meant for cutting seatbelts in a crash. Her hand moved before her brain could catch up, grabbing them, and in one swift, violent motion she reached out and cut. The sound of the scissors closing through Marcus's dreadlocks was like a gunshot in the silent cabin. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Marcus's hand went to his head, came away holding the severed lock, the golden bead still attached, and his face went through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, confusion, rage, devastation. Maya screamed. Actually screamed, a sound of pure horror and fury. And Elizabeth Chen-Williams, mother, woman who'd built her entire life on control and strategy, felt something cold and final settle into her bones. She pulled out her phone. Didn't say a word. Just pulled it out and started typing, her fingers steady, her expression blank. Rebecca seemed to come back to herself, the scissors still in her hand, Marcus's dreadlock on the floor like evidence at a crime scene. He was being aggressive and James grabbed her arm, his face ashen. Go to the back. Right now. Don't say another word. I was defending myself. Go. Back. Rebecca fled, and the cabin erupted. Passengers were standing, talking, filming on their phones. The captain's voice came over the intercom, asking what was happening. James was on the phone with the cockpit, his hands shaking. And Elizabeth just kept typing. Marcus sat down heavily, still holding the severed dreadlock, and the look on his face broke something in Elizabeth's chest. He looked young. Vulnerable. Like the little boy who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. Maya was crying, her hands over her mouth, and Elizabeth moved to them, kneeling in the aisle, pulling them both close. Mom, Marcus whispered, his voice cracked. She cut my hair. She cut my fucking hair. I know, baby. I know. But why would she? What did I do? Nothing. You did nothing. Elizabeth pulled back, framing his face with her hands, forcing him to look at her. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Do you hear me? He nodded, but his eyes said he didn't believe her, and that was what made Elizabeth's decision final. She stood, her phone still in her hand, and her demeanor shifted. The mother disappeared. The CEO emerged. James approached carefully. Ma'am, I am so sorry. There's no excuse. We're going to... What's the captain's name? Elizabeth's voice was calm. Too calm. I'm sorry. The captain. What's his name? Captain Stevens. Michael Stevens. I'd like to speak with him. Immediately. Ma'am, we're in flight. The captain can't leave the cockpit. Then patch me through to him. Or give me the airline's emergency management contact. Or your supervisor's direct line. I don't particularly care which, but I'm going to speak to someone in authority in the next 60 seconds, or I'm going to make a phone call that will make this situation significantly worse for everyone involved. Something in her tone made James's survival instincts kick in. Let me see what I can do. He disappeared into the cockpit, and Elizabeth looked down at her phone. The text she'd sent had already been received, read, and responded to. Her assistant, her legal team, her head of operations, all on standby. But she'd sent one other text. To someone who would appreciate the absolute chaos about to unfold. To David Park, CEO of Skyward Airlines. Her competitor. The man whose airline she was currently sitting on, whose employee had just committed assault on her child. The text was simple. David. We need to talk about your hiring practices. Call me when you land. E. Rebecca was in the back galley, hyperventilating, when the full scope of what she'd done started to sink in. She'd cut a passenger's hair. She'd assaulted a minor. On camera, at least 3 people had been filming. What the hell was I thinking? She whispered to herself, her hands shaking. Another flight attendant, Sarah, was staring at her in horror. Rebecca, what did you do? Why would you? He was being threatening. Did you see how tall he is? He stood up, and I felt threatened. He's a kid. And you cut his hair. With scissors. That's assault. I was defending myself. From Dreadlocks. The intercom in the galley buzzed. James's voice tight. Rebecca, the captain wants to see you in the cockpit. Now. Rebecca's legs felt like water as she made her way forward. The passengers all turned to watch her pass, their expressions ranging from fury to disgust. She kept her eyes down. In the cockpit, Captain Stevens didn't even look at her. You're grounded for the remainder of this flight. You'll sit in the jump seat, you won't speak to passengers, And when we land, security will escort you off the plane. Do you understand? Captain, I can explain. I don't want to hear it. The airline's legal team will contact you. Get out of my cockpit. Rebecca stumbled back into the cabin, feeling every eye on her, and that's when she saw Elizabeth standing in the aisle, phone to her ear, speaking in a low voice. Yes, I understand. Have the lawyers meet us at LaGuardia. I want a full investigation, and I want access to all employee files for the crew on this flight. And David, Elizabeth's voice dropped even lower. You need to understand something. Those are my children. My babies. So whatever relationship you think we have as colleagues, whatever professional courtesy you're expecting, that died the second your employee put scissors to my son's head. Are we clear? Rebecca felt ice flood her veins. Colleagues? CO children? Who the hell was this woman? Sarah, standing next to Rebecca, had pulled out her phone and was frantically Googling. Her face went white. Oh my God. Oh my God. What? Sarah turned the phone around, showing Rebecca a Forbes article, Elizabeth Chen-Williams, the woman reshaping air travel. With a photo of the woman currently standing in the aisle, looking every inch the corporate titan she was. That's Elizabeth Chen-Williams. She runs Quantum Airways. Oh Jesus, Rebecca. Those kids, those are her kids. You just assaulted the children of a CEO. On her competitor's airline. While she was doing research. Rebecca's knees gave out. She grabbed the galley counter for support, her vision tunneling. Sarah was still talking, her voice high with panic. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand what's about to happen to this airline? To all of us. But Rebecca couldn't answer. Because she was watching Elizabeth end her call and turn to look directly at her, and the expression on that woman's face was colder than anything Rebecca had ever seen. The remaining hour of the flight was the longest of everyone's lives. Marcus sat with his ruined dreadlock in his lap, Maya crying quietly beside him, Elizabeth in the row behind them making call after call. James brought them drinks, snacks, apologies, none of it helped. Other passengers kept approaching, offering sympathy, asking if there was anything they could do. One woman, an older black lady in her 60s, sat down in the empty seat next to Marcus and just held his hand for 20 minutes without saying a word. When she finally stood to go back to her seat, she kissed the top of his head gently and whispered, "You're going to be okay, baby. I promise you're going to be okay." Marcus nodded, but he didn't feel okay. He felt violated. Exposed. Like something had been taken from him that he couldn't get back. Maya couldn't stop crying, these quiet, hiccuping sobs that made Elizabeth want to tear the plane apart with her bare hands. But she didn't. She stayed calm. Made her calls. Built her case. By the time the plane began its descent into LaGuardia, Elizabeth had spoken with her own legal team, already drafting lawsuit paperwork. Skyward's CEO David Park, who sounded like he was going to have a heart attack. The FAA, filing a formal incident report. 3 different news outlets, providing exclusive statements. Her head of PR, preparing a press release. And her husband, Marcus Sr., who was already at LaGuardia waiting, and whose voice on the phone had been shaking with a rage that matched her own. The plane touched down, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed by airport security to remain seated after we reach the gate. There will be law enforcement boarding the aircraft. Please stay calm and follow all instructions." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Rebecca, still in the jump seat in the back, looked like she might vomit. When the plane stopped at the gate, the door opened, and 6 airport police officers boarded, along with 2 Skyward Airlines executives in suits who looked like they'd aged 10 years in the last 2 hours. One of the executives approached Elizabeth directly. "Ms. Chen-Williams, I'm Robert Chen, Vice President of Operations for Skyward. We are so deeply sorry for what?" "Save it," Elizabeth said coldly. "Your apologies mean nothing right now. What I want is that woman removed from this plane in handcuffs, a full investigation into your hiring and training practices, and a meeting with your CEO first thing tomorrow morning." "Of course. Absolutely. Whatever you need." The police approached Rebecca, and James had to tell them where she was because she'd actually tried to hide in the bathroom. They pulled her out, read her rights, and the entire first-class cabin watched as she was walked down the aisle in handcuffs, crying, trying to explain herself to officers who clearly didn't want to hear it. As she passed the twins' row, Rebecca made the mistake of looking at them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't you dare," Elizabeth said, her voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. "Don't you dare speak to my children." Rebecca's face crumpled, and the officers pulled her away. Outside the gate, Marcus Sr. was waiting, and the moment he saw his son, saw the uneven, hacked dreadlocks, the devastation in his eyes, he grabbed him and held on like he'd never let go. "Dad," Marcus whispered into his father's chest, and then he started crying for real, the kind of crying he hadn't done since he was small, big gasping sobs that shook his whole body. Marcus Sr. looked at Elizabeth over their son's head, and she saw the question in his eyes. "What are we going to do?" Her expression gave him the answer. "Everything. We're going to do everything." The video hit social media within hours. Multiple passengers had filmed the incident, and while most couldn't hear the exact words exchanged, the visual was damning enough. A white flight attendant cutting a black teenager's dreadlocks with scissors, the panic and horror on the faces of everyone watching, the mother standing behind filming on her phone with an expression of controlled fury. By midnight, it had 3 million views. By morning, it was on every major news outlet. CNN, NBC, Fox. Everyone had the story. Skyward Airlines flight attendant assaults teen in racially motivated attack. CEO's son attacked on competitor's flight, aviation industry reels. What happened to Marcus Williams? The viral video explained. Elizabeth didn't sleep that night. She sat in her home office, her legal team on video call, planning. Marcus Sr. stayed with the twins, who were both in Marcus's room, Maya holding her brother while he stared at his reflection in the mirror, touching his ruined hair. But Rebecca couldn't answer. Because she was watching Elizabeth end her call and turn to look directly at her, and the expression on that woman's face was colder than anything Rebecca had ever seen. The remaining hour of the flight was the longest of everyone's lives. Marcus sat with his ruined dreadlock in his lap, Maya crying quietly beside him, Elizabeth in the row behind them making call after call. James brought them drinks, snacks, apologies, none of it helped. Other passengers kept approaching, offering sympathy, asking if there was anything they could do. One woman, an older black lady in her 60s, sat down in the empty seat next to Marcus and just held his hand for 20 minutes without saying a word. When she finally stood to go back to her seat, she kissed the top of his head gently and whispered, "You're going to be okay, baby. I promise you're going to be okay." Marcus nodded, but he didn't feel okay. He felt violated. Exposed. Like something had been taken from him that he couldn't get back. Maya couldn't stop crying, these quiet, hiccuping sobs that made Elizabeth want to tear the plane apart with her bare hands. But she didn't. She stayed calm. Made her calls. Built her case. By the time the plane began its descent into LaGuardia, Elizabeth had spoken with her own legal team, already drafting lawsuit paperwork. Skyward's CEO David Park, who sounded like he was going to have a heart attack. The FAA, filing a formal incident report. 3 different news outlets, providing exclusive statements. Her head of PR, preparing a press release. And her husband, Marcus Sr., who was already at LaGuardia waiting, and whose voice on the phone had been shaking with a rage that matched her own. The plane touched down, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed by airport security to remain seated after we reach the gate. There will be law enforcement boarding the aircraft. Please stay calm and follow all instructions." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Rebecca, still in the jump seat in the back, looked like she might vomit. When the plane stopped at the gate, the door opened, and 6 airport police officers boarded, along with 2 Skyward Airlines executives in suits who looked like they'd aged 10 years in the last 2 hours. One of the executives approached Elizabeth directly. "Ms. Chen-Williams, I'm Robert Chen, Vice President of Operations for Skyward. We are so deeply sorry for what." "Save it," Elizabeth said coldly. "Your apologies mean nothing right now. What I want is that woman removed from this plane in handcuffs, a full investigation into your hiring and training practices, and a meeting with your CEO first thing tomorrow morning." Of course, Absolutely. Whatever you need. The police approached Rebecca, and James had to tell them where she was because she'd actually tried to hide in the bathroom. They pulled her out, read her rights, and the entire first-class cabin watched as she was walked down the aisle in handcuffs, crying, trying to explain herself to officers who clearly didn't want to hear it. As she passed the twins' row, Rebecca made the mistake of looking at them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't you dare," Elizabeth said, her voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. "Don't you dare speak to my children." Rebecca's face crumpled, and the officers pulled her away. Outside the gate, Marcus Sr. was waiting, and the moment he saw his son, saw the uneven, hacked dreadlocks, the devastation in his eyes, he grabbed him and held on like he'd never let go. "Dad," Marcus whispered into his father's chest, and then he started crying for real, the kind of crying he hadn't done since he was small, big gasping sobs that shook his whole body. Marcus Sr. looked at Elizabeth over their son's head, and she saw the question in his eyes. "What are we going to do?" Her expression gave him the answer. "Everything. We're going to do everything." The video hit social media within hours. Multiple passengers had filmed the incident, and while most couldn't hear the exact words exchanged, the visual was damning enough. A white flight attendant cutting a black teenager's dreadlocks with scissors, the panic and horror on the faces of everyone watching, the mother standing behind filming on her phone with an expression of controlled fury. By midnight, it had 3 million views. By morning, it was on every major news outlet. CNN, NBC, Fox. Everyone had the story. Skyward Airlines flight attendant assaults teen in racially motivated attack. CEO's son attacked on competitor's flight, aviation industry reels. What happened to Marcus Williams? The viral video explained. Elizabeth didn't sleep that night. She sat in her home office, her legal team on video call, planning. Marcus Sr. stayed with the twins, who were both in Marcus's room, Maya holding her brother while he stared at his reflection in the mirror, touching his ruined hair. "I grew these for 6 years, he said to no one in particular. 6 years. Since I was 8. And she just, in 2 seconds? "We'll fix it," Maya said fiercely. "We'll find the best loctician in the city. They can repair it." "It's not about fixing it. It's about..." His voice broke. "Why did she hate me so much? I didn't do anything to her." Maya didn't have an answer. Neither did their father, listening from the doorway, his heart shattering into pieces. The next morning, Elizabeth walked into Skyward Airlines headquarters in Midtown Manhattan flanked by 4 lawyers, and the receptionist's face went pale when she saw who was standing in the lobby. "I have a 9 a.m. with David Park," Elizabeth said calmly. "Yes, Ms. Chen-Williams. Right this way." She was led to a conference room where David Park was waiting, looking like he hadn't slept either. He stood when she entered, his hand extended, but Elizabeth didn't take it. "Sit down, David." He sat. "Let's be very clear about what's going to happen," Elizabeth began, her voice businesslike. "I'm filing a lawsuit against Skyward Airlines for negligent hiring, inadequate training, and creating an environment where racial discrimination is tolerated. I'm filing a personal lawsuit against Rebecca Morrison for assault and battery. I'm filing complaints with the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and every regulatory body that has jurisdiction over commercial aviation." David opened his mouth, but Elizabeth held up a hand. "I'm not finished. My son, my 14-year-old son, was physically assaulted on your aircraft by your employee because she decided his hair was inappropriate. Let that sink in. She cut his hair. Without permission. Without provocation. Because she didn't like how he looked. Do you understand the message that sends? To him? To every black child who sees this story? Elizabeth, we are horrified. You should be. Because this isn't just about my son anymore. This is about every passenger of color who's been profiled, harassed, or discriminated against on your flights. And I'm going to find them. All of them. We're going to build a pattern. And when we're done, your airline is going to be synonymous with racism." David's face was ashen. What can we do? How can we make this right?" "You can't. You can't make this right. My son will carry this trauma for the rest of his life. But you can do better. You can implement real training. Real accountability. You can fire every employee who's been reported for discriminatory behavior and actually follow up on those reports. You can create a system where a black teenager can sit in first class without being treated like a criminal. We will. I promise you, we will do all of that. Elizabeth stood. See that you do. Because I'm going to be watching. And David? This isn't just business anymore. You hurt my child. That makes it personal. She walked out, leaving him sitting there, and she felt nothing. No satisfaction. No victory. Just a hollow ache in her chest because none of this would undo what had been done. Rebecca Morrison's life imploded over the next 72 hours. She was fired from Skyward, arrested on assault charges, and her name became a trending topic on social media, not for anything good. People dug into her past, found old Facebook posts with questionable opinions, found stories from other passengers who'd felt discriminated against on her flights. Her ex-husband used the arrest as grounds to petition for full custody of their daughter. Her apartment complex asked her to leave after protesters showed up outside the building. She couldn't go outside without being recognized and confronted. In a weird moment of misguided desperation, she reached out to a local news station, wanting to tell her side of the story. The interview was a disaster. "I'm not a racist," Rebecca said, her eyes red from crying. I felt threatened. He stood up and he was so tall and I panicked. I made a mistake. I know I did. But I'm not the monster everyone's making me out to be. The interviewer, a sharp black woman named Janelle Harris, didn't let her off easy. "Ms. Morrison, you cut a 14-year-old boy's hair without his consent. In what world is that an appropriate response to feeling threatened by someone standing up?" I know it wasn't appropriate. I know that now. But in the moment, were you threatened by his height? Or by his dreadlocks? That's not fair. You told your colleague that the twins didn't belong in first class. You specifically mentioned their hair. How is that not racial discrimination? Rebecca's face flushed. You're twisting my words. I'm quoting your colleague's statement to the police. Did you or did you not say that their hair was inappropriate for first class? Silence. Ms. Morrison? I said that. But I didn't mean it in a racist way. How else could you possibly mean it? The interview went viral for all the wrong reasons. Rebecca became a cautionary tale, a meme, a symbol of everything wrong with implicit bias and unchecked prejudice. And while Elizabeth didn't take any pleasure in watching the woman's life fall apart, she didn't stop it either. Because Marcus still couldn't sleep through the night. Because Maya flinched every time they were in public. Because damage had been done that couldn't be undone. 3 months later, Skyward Airlines settled the lawsuit. The terms were confidential, but rumor had it the number had 8 figures. Elizabeth donated every penny to organizations fighting for racial justice and aviation industry reform. Skyward also implemented sweeping policy changes. Mandatory bias training for all employees, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, an independent review board for passenger complaints, and a scholarship program for students of color interested in aviation careers. Rebecca Morrison pleaded guilty to assault charges and received a suspended sentence, probation, and mandatory counseling. She'd never work in aviation again. But the real victory, if you could call it that, came 6 months after the incident. Marcus and Maya were flying to London for a summer program, and they were nervous. It was their first flight since that day. They'd started calling it that, capital T, capital D. Elizabeth offered to go with them, but Marcus shook his head. "We need to do this ourselves," he said. So she took them to the airport, walked them to security, and watched them go through. And then she sat in the terminal, her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for the text that would tell her they were okay. It came 30 minutes later from Marcus, "Boarding now. Flight crew is nice. Maya's still nervous but we're okay. Love you, Mom." She cried right there in the middle of JFK, and she didn't care who saw. On the plane, Marcus settled into his seat, and a flight attendant, a young black woman with box braids, approached with a smile. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" she asked. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his chest loosened. "Just water, thanks." "You got it." She paused, then said softly, "Nice locks, by the way." My brother has his. I know how much care goes into them. Marcus touched his hair, fully repaired now, thanks to a master loctician who'd worked for months to restore them. Thanks. Yeah, they mean a lot. She smiled, understanding in her eyes, and moved on. Maya reached over and squeezed her brother's hand. You okay? Yeah, he said and meant it. Yeah, I think I am. Because here's the thing about trauma, you don't get over it. You don't forget. But sometimes you learn to carry it. You learn that the world has sharp edges, but it also has people who see you, really see you, and meet you with kindness. And sometimes, when you have a mother who will burn down airlines for you, who will stand up and fight and refuse to let injustice slide, you learn that you're worth fighting for. The plane took off, and Marcus looked out the window at the clouds, at the endless sky, and thought about how far he'd come. How far they all had. His hair was still his. His identity was still his. And no one, could take that away again. Elizabeth Chen-Williams never flew Skyward Airlines again. She didn't need to. She'd seen everything she needed to see. And in boardrooms across the aviation industry, her name became synonymous with accountability. CEOs trained their staff differently, implemented new policies, and thought twice before letting discrimination slide. Because they'd seen what happened when you hurt someone's child. They'd seen what happened when a mother decided enough was enough. They'd seen what happened when power met prejudice, and power won. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was quieter. It was Marcus learning to trust again. It was Maya learning to advocate not just for her brother but for herself. It was a family that had been tested and came through it stronger. Not unscathed. Never unscathed. But stronger. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters. The end. But wait. Because the thing about stories like this is they don't really end. They echo. They ripple. They change things in ways you can't see until years later. 2 years later. The conference room at Quantum Airways headquarters was packed. Elizabeth stood at the front, a presentation clicker in her hand, facing a room full of airline executives, HR directors, and diversity officers from every major carrier in North America. 2 years ago, she began, her voice steady, my son was assaulted on a plane. Not because he was violent. Not because he was disruptive. But because a flight attendant looked at him, at his hair, at his skin, at his age, and decided he was a problem before he ever opened his mouth. The room was silent. That incident cost Skyward Airlines $42 million in settlements, lost customers, and brand rehabilitation. It cost them their CEO. It cost them 18% of their market share. But you want to know what it cost my son? She clicked to the next slide. It was a photo of Marcus at 13, grinning at the camera, his dreadlocks long and beautiful and full of life. It cost him his sense of safety, his trust in public spaces. It cost him 2 years of therapy. It cost him sleep, peace of mind, and a piece of his childhood he'll never get back. Next slide. A graph showing discrimination complaints in the aviation industry. A sharp spike in the months after the incident, as passengers who'd been silent suddenly felt empowered to speak up. But here's what it gave us, data. Hundreds of stories from passengers of color who'd experienced discrimination on flights. Patterns. Evidence. Proof that what happened to Marcus wasn't an isolated incident, it was systemic. She looked around the room, meeting eyes. So today, I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here as a mother who watched her child get hurt and decided to do something about it. I'm here to present the Aviation Equity Initiative, a comprehensive program that Quantum Airways has been piloting for the past year, and that I'm offering to every airline in this room, free of charge. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Free, someone asked from the back. Free, Elizabeth confirmed. Because this isn't about competition. This is about making sure no other child has to go through what Marcus went through. This is about changing the culture of an entire industry. She spent the next hour walking them through it. Bias training that actually worked, complaint systems with real accountability, hiring practices that prioritize diversity, and a passenger bill of rights that put protections in writing. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. But Elizabeth wasn't focused on that. She was focused on the text that had just come through on her phone. From Marcus. Good luck with the presentation. Make them listen. She smiled and texted back, already done. Marcus Williams was 16 now, taller, somehow even taller, and his dreadlocks reached the middle of his back, each one a testament to patience and care and the refusal to let anyone make him small. He was sitting in his high school's auditorium, waiting for his turn to speak. The school had invited him to talk to the incoming freshman class about advocacy and resilience, and he'd said yes even though public speaking made him want to throw up. Maya was in the front row, giving him a thumbs up. His dad was standing in the back, arms crossed, pride written all over his face. When his name was called, Marcus walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at 214-year-old faces staring back at him. So, he began, his voice cracking slightly, 2 years ago, a flight attendant cut off one of my dreadlocks because she didn't like how I looked. The auditorium went dead silent. I'm not going to lie to you, it sucked. Like really sucked. I was humiliated. I was angry. I felt violated in a way I didn't have words for. And for a long time I wanted to just disappear. I wanted to make myself smaller, less noticeable, less threatening. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But here's what I learned. Making yourself smaller doesn't protect you. It doesn't make people treat you better. It just makes you smaller. Some kids in the audience nodded, understanding in their eyes. So instead of shrinking, I grew. Not just my hair, though yeah, that too. Scattered laughter. But I grew in other ways. I learned to speak up. I learned that my voice matters. I learned that when something unjust happens, you don't have to just accept it. He looked at Maya, who was crying now, and he felt his own throat tighten. I also learned that you can't do it alone. I had my mom, who literally took on an entire airline for me. I had my sister, who held me while I cried. I had my dad, who showed me that being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain. It means feeling it and choosing to keep going anyway. Marcus gripped the podium, his knuckles going lighter. So if you take anything from my story, take this. You are not too young to matter. Your experiences are not too small to count. And when someone tries to cut you down, literally or figuratively, you have every right to stand up and say, no. Not me. Not today. The applause started slowly, then built, and by the time Marcus stepped away from the podium, the entire auditorium was standing. He found Maya in the crowd, and she grabbed him in a hug so tight he could barely breathe. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I'm just talking about what happened. No. You're making sure it means something. That's different. 6 months after that, Rebecca Morrison sat in her therapist's office, staring at her hands. She'd been coming here twice a week for 2 years, and she still didn't know if she was making any progress. How are you feeling about the anniversary? Her therapist, Dr. Patel, asked gently. Rebecca's jaw tightened. The anniversary. As if it were something to celebrate. 3 years since she'd destroyed her life in one moment of blind, stupid rage. I don't know, she said quietly. I've been thinking about those kids a lot. Wondering if they're okay. Have you thought about reaching out? They have a restraining order against me. I can't reach out. I meant emotionally. Have you thought about writing them a letter, even if you never send it? Processing what you'd say if you could. Rebecca had, actually. She'd written dozens of letters, on her phone, in notebooks, on napkins at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. Apologies that never felt adequate. Explanations that sounded like excuses. Promises to do better that rang hollow even to her own ears. I don't know what I'd say, she admitted. Sorry doesn't cut it. I know that. I can say I was tired, stressed, burned out, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I looked at those kids and I don't even know what I saw. Problems, maybe. Trouble. Something I could control when everything else in my life felt out of control. And now I see children. I see the terror in that girl's face. I see the way that boy's hands shook when he picked up his hair. I see it every time I close my eyes. Dr. Patel leaned forward. Rebecca, we've talked about this. You made a terrible choice. You hurt people. But you're doing the work now. You're facing what you did. That matters. Does it? Rebecca's voice was bitter. I lost my job. My daughter barely speaks to me. My name is literally an internet punchline. And those kids, Marcus and Maya, they're the ones who had to live with what I did. Me feeling bad about it doesn't change their trauma. No, it doesn't. But it changes you. And maybe that's all you can control. Rebecca nodded, but she didn't feel comforted. She felt like she was drowning in a regret so deep it had its own gravity. Later that night, she wrote another letter she'd never send. Dear Marcus and Maya, I know you'll never read this. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness and I'm not asking for it. But I need you to know that I think about you every single day. I think about the moment I put those scissors to your hair, Marcus, and I wish I could reach back through time and stop myself. I wish I could undo it. I wish I could give you back what I took. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I let my own bitterness and exhaustion turn into cruelty, and you paid the price for that. You were just kids, just trying to exist in a space you had every right to be in, and I made you feel like you didn't belong. I can't fix what I broke. I know that. But I want you to know that your mother was right. What I did wasn't about you. It was about me, about my own biases and prejudices that I didn't even know I had. Or didn't want to admit I had. I'm trying to be better. It's too late for you, but maybe it's not too late for the next person I interact with. Maybe that's all I can do, make sure I never hurt anyone the way I hurt you. I'm sorry. For whatever it's worth, I'm so sorry. Rebecca. She folded the letter, put it in a box with all the others, and closed the lid. 1 year after that, Maya Williams was 18, a freshman at Howard University, and she was standing on stage at a campus rally for racial justice. Her voice, amplified by the microphone, carried across the quad where hundreds of students had gathered. 4 years ago, my brother and I learned something that a lot of you already knew, she said. We learned that our existence, our Black existence, is political. That our hair is political. That our presence in spaces that weren't designed for us is political. The crowd murmured agreement. Marcus was 14. He wasn't protesting. He wasn't being disruptive. He was sitting in a seat his mother paid for, minding his own business. And someone decided that wasn't acceptable. Someone decided his hair made him a threat. Maya's voice shook with emotion, but she pushed through. That incident went viral. It became a news story, a lawsuit, a catalyst for change in the aviation industry. But you know what doesn't make headlines? The nightmares Marcus had for months afterward. The panic attacks I had every time we went through airport security. The way my mom blamed herself even though she did everything right. That's the part people don't see. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But here's what I want you to understand. We survived it. We're still here. Marcus is thriving. He's a junior now, planning to study law, probably going to end up fighting for civil rights or something disgustingly noble. Laughter rippled through the crowd. And I'm here, finding my voice, learning how to turn pain into purpose. Because that's what we have to do, right? We don't get the luxury of just being hurt. We have to take our hurt and make it mean something. The applause was deafening, and Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling too. After the rally, she called Marcus. How'd it go? He asked immediately. Good. Really good. I cried, but like the powerful kind of crying, not the falling apart kind. That's my sister. Making crying look badass. Maya laughed. How's college applications going for you? Stressful. But I'm writing my essay about the incident. Figured I should use it for something productive. Mom would be proud. Mom's already proud. She's insufferable about it. But Maya could hear the smile in his voice. You doing okay though? For real? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I am. Some days are harder than others, but I'm okay, Maya. We're okay. And it was true. They were okay. Not the same, you don't go through something like that and come out unchanged, but okay. Stronger maybe. More aware of the world's sharp edges, but also more determined to dull them for the next person. Present day. Elizabeth Chen-Williams stood in front of the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, preparing to testify on the Aviation Passenger Protection Act, legislation that had been directly inspired by what happened to her children 5 years ago. Madam Chair, members of the committee, she began, thank you for inviting me to speak today. 5 years ago, my son Marcus was physically assaulted by a flight attendant because of his hair. What could have been dismissed as one bad employee, one isolated incident, turned out to be symptomatic of a much larger problem in the aviation industry. She clicked to a presentation slide showing statistics, thousands of discrimination complaints filed since that day, patterns of racial profiling, inadequate training protocols. The Aviation Passenger Protection Act would require mandatory bias training for all airline employees, establish an independent oversight board for discrimination complaints, and create real consequences for airlines that fail to protect their passengers. This isn't about punishing airlines, it's about ensuring that what happened to Marcus never happens to another child. A senator leaned forward. Ms. Chen-Williams, some airline industry representatives have argued that this legislation is too burdensome, that it would increase costs and operational complexity. How would you respond to that? Elizabeth's smile was cold. I'd say that the cost of cutting a child's hair without consent, of traumatizing passengers, of perpetuating discrimination, that cost is far higher than any training program. Skyward Airlines learned that the hard way. I'd prefer other airlines learn it the easy way. The room erupted in murmurs, and Elizabeth knew she'd made her point. When she left the Capitol building, her phone buzzed with texts from both kids. Marcus, way to go, Mom. You made that senator look like he wanted to crawl under the table. Maya, that's my CO Mom. Taking names and changing laws. Love you. Elizabeth smiled, responded to both, and then stood on the steps of the Capitol, looking out at the city. 5 years. 5 years since the worst day of her children's lives. 5 years of fighting, advocating, pushing for change. And it was working. Airlines had reformed their practices. Discrimination complaints were taken seriously now. Passengers of color reported feeling safer, more respected. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. And sometimes, better is enough. 10 years later, Marcus Williams, ESQ, stood in a courtroom, delivering his closing argument in a discrimination case against a major retailer. He was 31 now, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for being absolutely relentless. My client didn't deserve to be followed through that store like a criminal, he said, his voice powerful, commanding. She didn't deserve to be publicly humiliated, to be treated as guilty until proven innocent. And she certainly didn't deserve to have her children witness their mother being degraded simply for existing while black. He paused, and for just a moment he was 14 again, feeling scissors bite through his hair, feeling the weight of every eye in that cabin judging him. I know what that feels like, he said quietly. To be seen as a threat before you've done anything wrong. To have someone decide your existence is an inconvenience. I know it intimately, and I'm here to tell you that it's not acceptable. It never was, and it never will be. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They came back with a verdict in his client's favor and damages that would force the retailer to completely overhaul their security practices. Marcus hugged his client, who was crying with relief, and then stepped outside the courthouse where Maya was waiting. Maya was a documentary filmmaker now, and she just premiered a film about the aviation industry incident and its aftermath. It had won awards at Sundance. It had changed conversations. It had mattered. Nice work, counselor, she said, bumping his shoulder. You too, Spielberg. They stood there, these siblings who'd been through hell together, who'd grown up in the glare of public attention, who'd turned their trauma into purpose. You think about it still? Maya asked quietly. That day. Every day, Marcus admitted. But not the way I used to. It doesn't hurt the same anymore. What does it feel like now? Marcus thought about it, touching his dreadlocks, longer than ever now, a statement, a reclamation. Like fuel. Like a reminder of why I do this. Maya nodded. Yeah, same. Their mom pulled up in a car. She'd retired from Quantum Airways 2 years ago but still consulted on diversity initiatives. She rolled down the window. You two coming? We have reservations. Where are we eating? Marcus asked. That new Ethiopian place. Your dad's already there, complaining that we're late. Marcus and Maya climbed into the car, and as Elizabeth drove through the city, she glanced in the rearview mirror at her children, grown now, strong, making the world better in ways she'd only dreamed of, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not because the world was fixed. It wasn't. Not because the fight was over. It wasn't. But because her children had survived something that could have broken them, and instead of breaking, they'd become unbreakable. And really, what more could a mother ask for? The real end. The story of Marcus and Maya Williams, of Elizabeth Chen-Williams, of Rebecca Morrison, is one about choices. About how one person's choice to act on their bias can ripple out in ways they never imagined. About how the choice to stand up, fight back, and demand better can change entire systems. It's about the cost of discrimination, not just in dollars, though there's that too, but in trust, in safety, in the psychological weight that people of color carry every day, wondering if today will be the day someone decides they don't belong. But it's also about resilience. About families that hold each other up. About turning pain into purpose and scars into strength. 10 years after a flight attendant cut a boy's dreadlocks, airlines across America had different training, different policies, different outcomes. Passengers reported feeling safer. Complaints were handled seriously. Change, slow and imperfect as it was, had come. And somewhere in that change was a 14-year-old boy's hair, falling to the floor of a first-class cabin, and a mother who looked at that hair and said, "Enough." Sometimes that's all it takes. One person saying enough. One person refusing to let it slide. One person deciding that their child's humanity matters more than politeness, more than convenience, more than keeping the peace. That's how you change the world. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But one flight, one policy, one lawsuit, one conversation at a time. Until the day when a black teenager can sit in first class with dreadlocks down to their shoulders, and nobody bats an eye. Until the day when hair is just hair, and skin is just skin, and everyone gets to move through the world without wondering if today's the day someone decides they're a problem. We're not there yet, but we're closer than we were. And that's because of people like Marcus, Maya, and Elizabeth. People who refused to stay silent. People who turned their worst day into a catalyst for change. People who said, with their actions and their voices and their unbreakable will, "Not my child. Not anymore. Not ever again." And the world listened. Finally, the world listened.